Asphalt Urban GT. This is a Nintendo DS launch title, which I really didn't have a lot of faith it'd be a great game. If you don't know Asphalt, the Asphalt series, or Asphalt Urban series maybe, it is a series developed by Gameloft. And Gameloft historically, I don't know what they're doing today, honestly. I haven't looked into it much, but historically we're kind of known for kind of cheap mobile rip-off titles of other games often. But this game in particular was a N-Gage title that got ported to Nintendo DS. And I think there might have been some history before the N-Gage as well, but the N-Gage seems to be the most representative of the version that ended up on the Nintendo DS. But either way, I didn't really expect much, but when I put it in, I was really surprised, because it's just a really smooth arcade style racer. It controls really well, it looks great, and I think it's just like a really impressive title for when it came out early on the DS, especially when you line it up against something like that Ridge Racer game, which the DS version of that game is kind of weird. So anyway, so in being an arcade racer, it is kind of generic, where it's just kind of, you know, straightforward racer, but you have nitro boost, right? And so you go through like an arcade mode, you have like a time trial mode, like a cop mode where you can like basically kind of like keep cars in front of you within like a radar space, and it like basically arrests them or whatever. But really the big focus of this game is a mode called Evolution Mode. And the Evolution Mode is essentially a career mode. And I'll be honest with you, I have not played career modes in other more sim-style racing games like a Gran Turismo or even like a Need for Speed. It's not really realistic, but you know, I think Need for Speed games have had like career modes as well. So this is really my kind of first exposure to that, but in saying that, I realize probably not a unique thing to this video game. But the idea is with the Evolution Mode is you have different tournaments, and you buy, sell, and upgrade cars, and the different cards you get, the different types of cards you get, will let you enter different tournaments. And when you finish that tournament, you get money. You can then use that money to buy a new car, but cars are usually really expensive, so usually I end up finding myself selling a lot of cars to kind of get myself to the next tournament. But then you can upgrade the car to make them better, but if you sell them, it seems like all those upgrades are kind of lost, and you don't really get a lot of money in return for them as well. So there's about like 10 or so tracks, and then they kind of go back and forth between them being forward and reverse. So, you know, I think it's like a decent number of tracks, especially for like a DS launch era game. But the kind of the big thing about this title is that each of these cars that you play feel immensely different to control. Like it's not so much that the Hummer is like, you know, I feel like when I think about like kart race or something like that, right? The level of control that like a Bowser has versus like a Toad or something like that, it's very noticeable that like he turns less, and then also he's like a little slower but picks up speed and goes a lot faster. But I feel like the handling of like a Hummer versus like a sports car in this game is almost entirely different. Like the Hummer's races are these kind of slow, methodical races, almost like controlling like a giant mech in some way, where you turn, you have to like kind of predict these turns where you can really wrap around a corner and things like that. And obviously like upgrading your car changes how that works, but you know, the style of racing you do with like one of those Hummers is incredibly different from the style of racing that you do with like a sports car. And I think that range of differences, while you know it's not always that big of a difference, I think that is really important because it does keep the races feeling fresh. And as you're buying and selling all these cars, each car has its own unique movement. So even though you're playing through essentially the same tracks over and over again, how you approach those tracks feels very different depending on the type of car you're driving. In my opinion on that. There is some weird stuff with it though, where like certain things lack collision. So when you're driving down the road, there'll be like lampposts in the road and things like that. But if you drive into the lamppost, like nothing will happen. You just kind of drive right through it. But I didn't think it's like a huge deal. It just was like kind of one of those weird things, especially since a large portion of this game is focused on you breaking items in the environment to get more nitro boost. So I mentioned earlier you can boost, but how you get your nitro is a couple different ways. One, it kind of very slowly naturally builds up as you're just driving. You can also interact with other cars on the road. So if you get really close to another car, you get like a boost to your nitro. If you dodge a car or even hit a car at high speed, you'll like spin out on it, and like you'll lose some speed, but you'll get like a full bar of nitro kind of thing. And there's like jumps you can do and things like that. So a lot of this game is really focused on like driving in ways that encourage you to play a little more risky than just, you know, always taking the safe line every time to make sure you're getting the most nitro. You can get nitro from drifting too, but I feel like it's significantly less of a focus. Like, you get it, but it's not, it's like maybe like a double up of like the slow nitro boost you already would have gotten. So it's not like a reliable way to keep a high level of nitro, which I do like. Even though drifting is important for turns, it's not the focus for speed boost. Like, that's kind of the problem with like Mario Kart games, I feel like, is that drifting becomes an immense focus because of the speed boost. Where this game, drifting is more about how it helps you go around the corner and less about, you know, this is the fastest way to go around because you're going to immediately like shoot out of this turn with a ton of speed or something like that, which I really enjoyed. And so it just kind of encourages you to kind of like try different things while you're racing a little bit, but breaking the things in the environment are definitely kind of the easiest way, because there's just like a stack of boxes, you drive through it, you break them, and then you get some speed boost or nitro filled up. You get like 5 nitros in total that you can have. What's kind of interesting though is that while the enemies themselves, they won't like hit those boxes or anything like that, if you hit those boxes or any destructible items in the environment that give you that nitro, they are gone from the race, the entire race essentially. So you have kind of this limited resource of nitro boost sometimes, and you can only hold up to 5 nitro at once. So there's kind of this like a little bit of planning sometimes where you're like, okay, I really want to have boost available at the end of the race, you know, my 3rd lap. So you might go out of your way to avoid these boxes for every single lap for the first 2 laps, just so you have something available that's easy to get and will let you really start, you know, just like jetting towards the end of the race kind of thing. So I like that there's like a little bit of strategy in there as well. So I think it's just like a good mix of a lot of like considerations while you're racing that are like slight considerations that aren't like individually they aren't huge deals, but overall they make you kind of think a little bit more when you're racing through the game with that. The other aspect of this game that I actually think is pretty cool is there's like a traffic aspect to it, and so traffic is obviously a part of a lot of racing games. I'm not saying it's not, you know, this is a unique thing here. You know, you have the left side of the road that all the cars are coming at you, the right side where they're going away from you kind of thing, and some races have like more or less traffic, and the higher difficulty gets, kind of the denser the traffic gets. But one aspect that was kind of neat is like when cars would get in accidents, they would just like stop. Or at least that's what I understand is happening. So basically, if you or AI racers drive into these cars and hit them, they'll kind of stop in their tracks. They might, you know, be on their at an angle horizontally. So you can end up in these situations where like if a bunch of cars were hit at one point of the track, they're all just kind of stuck there and they just stay there the rest of the race. And so you kind of have this weird impenetrable wall that kind of shows up. You gotta kind of navigate around on each lap kind of thing. It doesn't happen super often, I will say, but when it happens, you're like, it's always just interesting to try to like get around. And you can also see all the AI also getting stuck on it. And then, you know, it's always kind of a blessing when you're in a really hard race and then all of a sudden, you know, every racer in front of you is just stuck on all these cars. You're like, oh, I'm just gonna slowly drive my way around this. So I like that the aspect of the traffic was a lot more disruptive than I feel like other racing games, and it felt fair, I think, is the big thing. Like, the traffic didn't feel like something that was in the way of only you as the player. The AI seemed to often get caught up on it as well. And it's pretty punishing when you get caught up on traffic. And this is why I think part of why I don't mind that like some of the light posts and stuff that wouldn't break normally, that those things didn't have collision, is because actually like readjusting yourself when you come to a hard stop. Because when you hit these things, I will say there's like no physics. It's just you hit it and then you just kind of stop. Trying to back out and get around that stuff can be a little weird, especially if you have another AI card ramming into the back of you as well. So it's a little finicky when you're like trying to, you know, back out and get around something. But overall, I do think it was like a really nice touch to that game a lot. So, but yeah, and I guess I kind of expected that like the Nintendo published racer for like, you know, with Ridge Racer on the DS would end up being kind of the better experience overall. But I really found that where like Ridge Racer, that game really struggled from overly sensitive controls and just like some weird collision stuff with other cars and things like that was really disruptive to racing and in a way that I felt like was not great. And then also the AI in Ridge Racer DS, the rubber banding is horrific once you get to the higher levels. I talked a little bit about that video where it's like sometimes you can do a perfect run and just like nothing changes. And so it's just kind of, I was really impressed that like this kind of garbage, what I perceived as garbage mobile game title that was just like hastily ported to the DS or something, Turned out great, runs super smooth, plays super well. And I think, you know, overall, I mean, is it the most inspiring game ever? Probably not. It is probably mostly like most other arcade racing games, but it just like works really well. And I think it's a great looking DS game as well. I think it looks better than Ridge Racer, although I think Asphalt, coming in from the N-Gage maybe, is probably part of the reason why, plays a lot more with player perspective, where they don't render out 3D, like full 3D environments. They usually have a very limited scope of a 3D environment in front of you, and then there's like these like 2D backdrops that kind of like make it seem like there's an additional 3D environment. This is pretty standard stuff for the most part, but how they handle it in this game I think is particularly well done. And so like I actually watched somebody play it on emulator, and when you boost the resolution, you can kind of really tell, you know, how far away these like 2D sprites are from you, and like you can see when you come around corners the big gaps in between them and stuff like that. But when you're playing on like the original DS resolution, I think it's really good at covering that stuff up. And Ridge Racer overall looks good too, I'd say, but this game just looks a lot more flashy. So maybe I'm biased because it's a Las Vegas track. I do like that the Las Vegas track has like 4 Luxors in it. And all of Las Vegas is just like basically 20 casinos, and then you're back out in the desert. So that was kind of funny. So anyways, Asphalt for the DS, Asphalt Urban GT for the DS. I think it's a great game, and I personally think I would recommend it to anyone who is looking at like the DS launch lineup. It's definitely not a game to just like scoff off and be like, oh, Gameloft made a bad racing game or something like that.